If you either currently have an operations manager or you're considering one and you're just not sure if you need one, today we're going to dive into the top 5 responsibilities an ops manager can and should take on for you. So we're chatting with Jennifer Staats, the founder of Staats Solutions. Jennifer has been in the real estate industry for 14 years and has been in operations in the real estate space for 10 years. Jennifer, thanks for chatting. So we're going to save time and just dive into the first one on your list. What's number one responsibility ops managers do?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first things that an operations manager should do, or probably is doing if you have one, is probably mastering your systems and looking for gaps. So, I mean, every operations manager should be aware or understand every system that you are using, and then they should constantly be looking for the gaps in all of those, so you can look for either savings or integration options, or if you can use things on a higher level. That should really be where your operations manager's role is going to really excel.
Yeah, and there can be some confusion around, well, isn't an ops manager the same thing as an admin? But it's very different. Can you shed a little bit of light of what the difference is and why it should be a different title?
Yeah, I mean, I hear, and a lot of times I'll just tell people, like, when I'm bringing on a client, they're like, what do I call you? I'm like, I really don't even care what you call me. But I think when we're looking at what an operations manager is, what an admin is, I think a lot of times people kind of wrap everything into an operations position. So they might call an admin or an executive assistant or operations or transaction coordination. And generally, I'll just look at like what the actual roles are, because sometimes an operations manager is all of those things, because maybe your team is fairly small. Maybe they do all of it. Maybe they were an admin and they kind of graduated into that. But what I really call an operations manager is where they're taking care of your entire business, your entire operations. They are managing your TC, they're managing your marketer, regardless of how big you are, right? You could have 150 agents or two, or I even see operations managers where, it's really just a small team of admin where you've got like a TC, a marketer, and one agent. But it's really an operations person is where you're going to have them oversee the whole umbrella of your business, where they're really seeing it from like point A to point Z.
Okay, so going back to finding gaps, how would an operations manager be able to do that? Are they like every now and then shadowing someone and their work and how they operate, or how are they finding those gaps?
Yeah. I mean, when I'm coming on with some of our new clients, the first thing I do is I'm talking to the agents. I'm looking at like reviews from the clients. I'm talking to their current admin, their current marketer, and we're just trying to figure out like where their frustrations lie, what ideas they have for the business, because sometimes you can spot gaps before you even dig into the systems. You can say, yeah, I get really frustrated because all three of us do the same tasks. That happens quite often, where it's like the team lead, the marketer, and the admin all find themselves doing the same thing. So I can spot a gap right there, right? Or we can say, hey, let's just look at all your tech and let's go look at the usage. Who's actually logging in? Do we have too many users? Stuff like that. We can spot like gaps as far as like spending too much on some of our tech platforms right there. So those are some of the things we can easily spot gaps in the system. And then when we start digging into like the actual tech and we're like, maybe we're doing like a test workflow on something, I can see that things are firing wrong, or the lead doesn't go into the right place, or there's no follow-up trigger. So there's a lot of things that we can do, just very quickly by doing a quick audit of everyone's feedback that's actively been using the system. And then once we're kind of going through it, we're going, hey, that can be improved. We're adding it onto our vision board, or like actively fixing it as we go.
Is there ever a state of the business you're working with that says, okay, we're all set, we're good, like let's just run on autopilot, we don't need to make any more changes?
I think most team leads think that there's going to be a point of that. And I just think that there never is. Like, I'm always telling people, like, a workflow and a system is like a living, breathing thing, a living, breathing document and stuff like that, where we're constantly looking at it and we're tweaking, because obviously in real estate, things change and we're going into a market that's ever changing. So things that would have worked a year ago, we're now tweaking again because maybe the verbiage needs to be different, or maybe we had to par down our workforce because we had some budget cuts. So then that's going to tweak all of your systems too, right? Because maybe you had more, you know, bandwidth labor wise to do things. So no, I would say it's always going to be a living, breathing thing, whether it's client facing or it's agent facing. I mean, I feel like you always need to be improving your business.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to go stagnant and not survive, not make it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I wrote down a note that if you don't hear from your operations manager of ideas, you probably don't have the right operations manager, or they're too scared to tell you. And so that might be something right there. That's a gap between you and the operations manager. Have you ever seen that happen?
I mean, yeah, I think it's when I'm doing client consults with people, it's funny because they're always asking this question. They're always asking, like, are you relying on me, meaning like the team lead, to give all the ideas, or are you going to come up with ideas? I'm like, look, my team will always, we work with coaches, we work with all types of different people. We're always educating ourselves. So if I see something, like I'm constantly like listening to a podcast, or I'll be listening to another client talk, and I'll be like, I could apply that to this person over here. I'm like, think of this. And they're like, oh my God. So yes, you should be hearing from your ops person, whether they're not a visionary. So you can't think of it like that. Not always. Sometimes they are too, but like more often than not, they should be coming up with ideas on how to improve things. They're listening to your team. They're listening to the agents. They're your boots on the ground person that are actively working in your system. So they should have ideas for improvement, or because they know your vision too as a business owner and what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of whenever I used to work for a team full time as their administrative assistant. I had a little bit of ops management in there because they didn't have an operations manager, but I pretty much just followed what they asked me to do. I had a set
Mm-hmm.
of standard operating procedures. Every now and then they said, "Hey, can you look into this and see if there's anything we can do to improve it?" Or I would proactively, like you said, hear a podcast or something, and I would give that idea, but I had less authority to do it rather than an
Mm-hmm.
operations manager. And
Yeah.
that's something to take into consideration probably if you either currently have one or you're considering one, is there's no point in hiring an operations manager if you're not going to listen to what they find.
That's a great point. And that probably comes down to like the job description too. Like, if do you have an admin assistant or do you have an operations manager? You might want to look at their day-to-day tasks and see if you even gave them, the right or the bandwidth to even come up with good, great ideas. If they're they're just very, very task-based, they might not even feel like they can share their bright idea. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So earlier you mentioned they oversee like the transaction coordinator. What does that mean?
Generally, I say that like an operations manager should be aware of everything that's going on in the business, right? The sales workflows, the transaction workflows, the marketing workflows, irregardless of what's going on, they should have an awareness of what's happening in the business. Because I often find that it's the operations side of the marketing and the transactions that is actually the hardest part. So they should be managing the transaction coordinator, whether they were the one that hired them or they built out the systems. It depends on if you've got in-house or, as a separate contractor, but they should still be kind of managing your transaction coordinator, whether it's the entire workflow or at least making sure that the agents are happy with them, that clients are happy with them, that you're receiving the service that you really want out of your transactions. I think then operations and a TC should be working really hand in hand to make that happen.
Okay, that makes sense. So what's number 2 on the list?
Number two, clearly communicate and integrate your team. I think sometimes we see an operations manager as like a behind the scenes person. Sometimes I kind of feel like we're seen as like maybe like unfriendly or nerdy, where I really think an operations manager should be someone that should be clearly communicating with all departments, agents, CEO, admin staff, because that's who's going to really integrate everyone together. We always think of just like the tech when we talk about integration, but really you want every department working together to make it efficient. More often than not, I see that a lot of real estate teams are kind of like all working like separate. They're all running a million miles an hour, but they have no, cross collaboration, where your transaction coordinator has all of the information on your transactions. Who's the best person to get that to marketing? Like you're getting all this information, but I find that a lot of times you're getting it in 4 different things. And I think an operations manager should really be integrating everyone together.
Yeah, and that really affects the client's experience with the team, because if they're just handed off from one person to another, and as the next person comes in and your team doesn't have much context, they're just like, okay, here's what I do. They either could just be repeating questions, or there can be a disconnect, or if there wasn't like a warm handoff or a warm introduction, it's not going to make sense. So like right before we started recording this video, I'm currently trying to buy and sell. And the team I'm working with, they're very good at the warm handoffs, and still including the team leader, which I highly doubt she's able to read all of those emails, but
Yeah.
they're including Sunny, who I've been working with in all of the communication, because I think her name's Martina. She's a transaction coordinator for both buying and selling on the team, but she's looping in Sunny, my seller agent, and looping in Jane and everything. And both Jane and Sunny did a good job of saying, okay, you're going to hear from Martina. She's the one who will communicate with you about XYZ. I will still be your contact for XYZ. That way I'm not confused of like not only who's who, but like, when do I contact Martina? When do I contact Jane? Kind of like that cohesive working together model.
Yeah, I mean that's so important, right? Because on the seller side, or the client side, if there's 5 different people reaching out to them for the same bit of information, you're like, wait a second, what are you doing? And that happens on the agent side too. Like, let's say you're onboarding an agent and every single team member is on a different page. I think that's really where operations comes into play. Like, what is the experience on every side throughout a transaction or onboarding or whatever? How can we work together and really integrate and not use like 50 different spreadsheets for everything? We're all working out of the same place. I think that's where, I really find that operations manager can be really important.
Yeah. And like you said, all working in the same system. So what's cool is I worked with Sunny and Jane before I hired them. And so I was curious, because I call and text Jane all the time. And I'm like, I bet I'm calling her on her personal cell. But I went to their pub account and everything's in Follow Boss. All of my, probably hundreds of texts now. Like, oh my gosh, she's got all of our communication in FUB. I thought for sure this was a personal cell. So I don't have her cell phone number. I have her Follow Boss phone number.
I mean, it's funny to see the other end. I mean, that's how I used to use Follow Up Boss too when I was an agent, is I just had everything right in there, and my assistant can jump in and see exactly every single piece of communication I've had with those clients. And we had really great feedback on that because we were really working hand in hand in the same system. So super, super important.
Yeah. So when you say like an operations manager needs to communicate with all these different departments, let's just talk about a typical day. What would that look like when an operations manager starts their day and they need to talk to these different people? Are they getting on calls? Are they just emailing or instant messaging these different people? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, so the way that I structure like my internal team communication when I'm working with the team is we generally have regularly scheduled calls. So we're just all in the loop. Generally have some sort of project management system. So we're all aware of where everybody's working, project management or a workflow somewhere, depending on what we're working on, whether it's transactional or, some larger project. I'm a big fan of Slack. So I try to not do tons of emails. I run too many businesses to have like that many emails in my inbox. So we usually use a lot of Slack. I really like Slack just because it's super transparent. So like we have a marketing channel, everybody's aware. It's the best feeling to go in a marketing channel and like they've already handled whatever like issue there is before I even have to get involved. But there's a lot of transparency for me and the team lead. So day to day would be regularly scheduled meetings with my team, checking on projects via usually Asana for us. And then we have a lot of internal communication in Slack, but we do a lot of channels in Slack. And for those of you that haven't used Slack before, it's just basically a kind of like an instant messaging platform. We create channels for each different subject. That way there's not a lot of direct messages because I think that can get lost.
Mhm.
We have a lot of just kind of open communication where we're all collaborating on stuff. I find that it's a little easier to get things done.
Yeah, you'll probably have channels for like that are private. So they have the little lock icon if you use Slack and it says agents, and then another one with the lock icon for
Mhm.
transaction coordinator or coordinators. And then you probably just have a general channel for like everyone needs to know about this.
Yeah, sometimes we'll even do like for teams that have like a lot of people that work within one transaction. Sometimes we'll actually have channels for each listing. That way the TC's in
Okay.
there, the marketer's in there, I'm in there, the team lead, the agent. That way they're all collaborating on every single transaction, and then everyone can run with whatever they need in a very clear communication channel versus like a bunch of email threads. But it just depends on like what they're trying to do. That team specifically was very, very listing heavy, and they did a lot of listing prep. So there's a lot of moving parts. So it needed a lot of collaboration in one place. So we put it there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Emails can get overwhelming when you've got like 50 emails in one thread.
Mm-hmm.
Did that team, did they ever somehow like copy paste the email communication or at least a link to a thread from emails or into the Slack channel at all?
Sometimes, I mean, sometimes they would say, "Hey, like, have you seen this email thread right here?" Mainly, that's kind of like towards the agent, right? Because they didn't respond or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it was just in regards to the actual listing, the listing prep. So they did a lot of like construction on properties and stuff like that, where they needed to collaborate on it. But generally, we just kind of train the team that that's the first place we all want to start talking rather than email, and then it gets a lot of you cut down on emails quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah, it's nice. Yeah, for sure. And you're able to just, instant message each other really fast and not have to wait for an email. Like we don't check our email as often as we check Slack.
Yeah. Yep. Same.
Yeah. What's number 3 on your list?
All right. I've got, so this is a big one. I think it's your operations manager is going to make your vision as the CEO, team lead, broker, owner come to life. So something that we do at Stats is like we always have a vision board running. So every time our CEOs come back from like a big conference, or we're just having like a brainstorming session, or even just directly off of a consultation call, I'm instantly going, these are all things that my visionary client wants to achieve, whether it's now, a year from now, 5 years from now, we're always keeping that on track, and we're helping form their vision. So I find that a lot of our agent clients, like they have this grand thing, they don't know how to implement it. So we're taking their vision, we're actually implementing what they want to do. So we help them that way.
That's cool. I don't think I have any questions about that one.
Pretty clear, right?
Yeah,
But
I think the only
it's
thing
so
is,
important.
yeah. Do you ever come across unrealistic vision boards, and how do you approach those?
Yeah, I mean we do. And that actually comes into play a little bit. I'll go into the next one because I'm like my fifth one was use all of this and keep your business on track. So like I'm taking their vision, but also going, hey, you gave me contradictory visions,
Mhm.
right? Right here, you told me that you wanted to grow the team to 200 agents. But over here, you gave me a contradicting vision or goal, right? Which one are we working towards? And, if we're trying to cut staff or cut budgets, it's very hard to get to this other point. So I'm always like going, okay, these are the projects we're working on. Is it actually working towards the overall goal? And we're having conversations around that. I'm still always tracking what they want to do, right? I'm not just instantly going, no, that doesn't work. But maybe it's a not right now thing. It's like, hey, we already are at our bandwidth, so we can't work on that right now. Maybe that's a Q2 or Q3 goal that we can start working on. So it is like an evolving thing where we're going, hey, because I find that like if I don't put my foot down or an operations manager doesn't put their foot down, you can start working on too many projects that aren't realistic to finish in the timeline that you have or in the budget you have. So you have to be aware of being able to have that conversation with your CEO or your business owner and saying, hey, we can't do all of this at the same time. What's the real overarching vision or goal we're working towards?
Yeah, one thing that I'm sure is common of contradictory of saying like, oh, we want to grow our team to 200, but then they'll say we only want quality people. We don't want people that are just taking up a seat in follow up boss or my CRM that aren't producing. And so that's contradictory of well, you want 200 people, but you only want like the top 1%. So if you're
Yeah.
going to find top 1%, that's not going to equal 200 people. So
Yeah.
what do you want?
Yeah, yeah. And it's very, very common, right? Because I mean, this is all business owners, but I see it in real estate a lot where we're coming back from retreats or conferences or listening to a podcast, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, my goal is now I'm gonna launch this other thing. And it's like, okay, well, that's amazing. I'm super excited for you, but the team's bandwidth is XYZ, or do you have the time for that? I mean, really digging into what it's going to take to achieve this at a high level, because I never want anyone I'm working with to just fall flat. I want them to really achieve it on a high level. So really digging into, the systems they have, the people they have to achieve what they just threw out there.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, you mentioned vision board. What do you use like a website for that or an app?
I just use Asana. Like we just have for every single one of our clients, I start with a project that's called vision board. And I don't assign any of those tasks to anyone. The goal of that vision board is that we're never actually assigning, but once those tasks are assigned, they get moved off the vision board and they're put into a board that we're actively working on. But the thought behind it is because you can forward emails directly into Asana,
Yeah.
if someone's sending ideas or like, hey, I want to, rip off and duplicate this thing, I can forward it right into Asana, put in the right project, and the whole trail is just completely kept there forever. And then once the team has bandwidth, we can go pull it off the vision board and put it into action. But that's all we do. Like we just use Asana and it's kind of like an idea board, and then we'll pick it up from there and actually start working on it.
So whenever a team owner gives you an idea, do you ever need to down with them and say, okay, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Is this something that's really going to benefit you? And then do you have to do an overview of their current systems and say, well, this is actually going to interfere with this system. You're going to have things canceling each other out if you've got like automations going on, or this is going to be redundant. Um, it's going to be too much. Do you ever sit down with the team owner and talk about the idea or vision they have before you decide, yeah, I think that's a good idea?
We do. I mean, I also have regular meetings with our clients, our operations managers do. And if we're going to take something off the vision board and start putting it in action, we're going to discuss what it's going to take to get there. Right. So it could be like something that sounds as simple as switching a CRM, right? We're switching from
That's
this
not
to,
simple.
yeah, it's not simple, but it sounds really simple in the beginning, right? Like I want to switch these things. I'm like, okay, that's amazing. I am totally on board from switching to this to Follow Up Boss. But let's look at the steps it's going to take to get there. What kind of integrations do we have set up on the back end, whether it's transactional or whatever? So we're digging into the whole thing and going, that's an amazing vision, but this is what the steps it's going to take to get there. Do we feel like this is something we want to put our bandwidth towards right this second? Because we have these other 4 things going on. And a lot of times when we actually break down the steps of what it's going to take to get there, or the money it's going to take to get there, or whatever, a lot of times like maybe actually it's not a right now thing. Maybe it's 2 months from now. Let's finish these out. And then we're going to set the goal a little bit further down. Or maybe it is, yes, this is a for now thing. We either need to hire someone else or we need to delegate out, whatever that is. But it is a whole conversation of this is all the steps that my understanding of it's going to take to get there. I understand it's important to you because of XYZ. And so we're listening to it, but then we're also kind of going, okay, these are the steps it's going to take to get there. What's our priority level on it? So it's a really wholehearted conversation of the projects we're going to be working on.
Cool. So you talked about 3 and then 5. What's number 4?
So number 4 is just, I think your operation manager should be helping or creating the actual workflows across all avenues. And why I say all avenues is because I think a lot of people just think operations should only be kind of helping systematize like transactions. I feel like that's the feedback I get from a lot of people. They just think that it's like a transaction coordinator workflow type thing. And I actually think it should be all things. It should be, how are you creating workflows and, stuff that you can replicate across your agents, whether it's onboarding and offboarding, or maybe it's their training. I think all of that can be inclusive of an operations manager's role, because your agents are your most important thing, right? We all think clients are, but it's really like your agents, how is their day-to-day going working with your brokerage or team? The transactions obviously are super important because how are your clients day-to-day going working with your team? But then there's also marketing too, right? And I think a lot of times they're like, no, operations shouldn't be touching marketing. And I think that's not correct. I think it starts with the operational efficiency for marketing to really be efficient. So I think that's one of the most important jobs of your operations manager, is making sure that every single workflow across the entire board is working really well, and you can replicate that exact system over and over and over again, because that's really the only way you're going to be able to scale a business.
Okay, well, yeah, I don't have any follow-up questions to that too. That was perfect. Well, so how does someone decide? So in case people are watching, they don't know already, you operate a fractional operations business for real estate agents and teams. How does someone decide whether or not to just bring someone full time directly in-house versus and having to train them versus hiring an operations company like yourself?
Yeah. I would say, like, a lot of times when people are calling me, they're calling me for a couple different reasons. They might either have no interest in training someone. They know they want to get to point B, but they have no interest in bringing someone on. We're very plug and play. We know most of the systems. We need very little training. We just need you to show us like your vision and we can make it happen. Two would be budget. Like bringing on a full-time person can be pretty pricey, and there's not only just their salary, but there's PTO and benefits and all of that type of stuff. There's turnover, stuff like that. We have a lot of clients that want to run multiple businesses. So they'll come to us because they really just want to deal with one company, that we have the capability of running all of their businesses or all of their brokerages. Or a lot of times we have teams that have an in-house admin that they thought that could be the operations manager, and they have found that maybe either they don't want to be the operations manager, or maybe they're just not a good fit to be an operations manager. So they'll come and hire us on a very fractional part of their business. We'll still help train their admin. We have no problem with that, but they just need that extra layer of support to get to the next level. So there's a couple different reasons why people would give us a call.
What does fractional mean? How many hours does someone work for an agent or a team?
Yeah, I mean, for us at Staats Solutions, I don't know about across all other, people that call themselves fractional, but for us, it's a minimum of 10 hours a week. We'll work with a team. I just find that anything less than 10 hours, we're not really working we're not really involved in your business day to day. So 10 hours and above, we have clients that are up to 80 hours a week, and we run multiple businesses for them. But
Well, like
10
how does
hours
one
a week.
person do 80 hours?
Oh no, yeah, not one person. I mean, you get assigned an entire team. So you have an entire team of people working with your agents and your business and all of your systems, and then helping you get to, the next level or wherever you want to be.
Yeah. Alrighty. So if someone decides, yeah, I do need that extra help, how do they reach out to you to learn more?
Yeah. So the best place to get a hold of me would probably be two different places. One is just going to the statssolutions.com website. The contact us button goes directly to my calendar. I am happy to schedule a free 45-minute consultation with anybody that's having any type of issue, whether you have an operations manager, you have a project. I'm always happy to direct you to wherever I think might be the best fit. I'm not very salesy, so I'm not going to push you to work with Stats if I don't feel like it's a good fit. Or the easiest place to find me is on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Jennifer the Realtor, so pretty easy to find me there.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah, Jennifer the Realtor. I bet that's really everyone wants that, and you have
Yeah,
don't
I've
lose
had it for
it.
ages. Yeah, I've had it for ages.
Get on early, get it on all the platforms. If you don't, you never know if you'll need it on TikTok. Cool. Well, I appreciate it, Jennifer, as always. Appreciate the insights in the operations world that I don't really have much insight to. So I think lots of people will find this talk helpful.
Thanks for having me.